Okay, you've been very good in putting questions in for me to put to our panel, so now's the chance to start asking some of those questions. We'll try and get through as many of those as we can. Gentlemen, the first question is an interesting one. I'll point this to you first, Dale, but obviously Gary, please chip in as well. Question here says, isn't it the case that those outside IT don't want to know about SOA? They just want to know about their business benefits. In your experience, what is the essence that a business user needs to know? Can they get away with knowing nothing, and SOA being a means by which IT delivers value seamlessly to the users?
That's an interesting question, actually, and we got a lot of feedback from people who tried various strategies for engaging the business around SOA. One of the things which can lead to problems, actually, is you walk into the offices of some of the business stakeholders and you say, we've got this new way of doing things, it's called SOA, and you start trying to explain it. And you very quickly run into all kinds of problems, and that's not necessarily the smartest way of doing it. What seems to work most effectively is just start talking services with business people. So behind the scenes, you do whatever you want in terms of how you define your modelling and everything else. But if you start then just engaging with them on that basis, it's amazing how many business people just naturally feel that they're having a much more comfortable conversation now than they were maybe last time when you're putting all these structured diagrams in front of them and everything else. So just start doing it is the advice that we get back from people that have been successful.
So I would agree with that. I think absolutely it's the latter. Let's choose a vocabulary that the business is comfortable with. Services seem to be a natural language that they're happy and comfortable in talking about. And when we talk around the consumer models, if you like, around what services are important to the business, you pretty quickly, I find, get the line of business or the sales director or whoever it happens to be quite excited about what it is what product, what channel, what service they're looking to offer. And if you can get them just to keep that thought, then the smart thing to do is for the IT guys just to fold into that whole process, and then, as Dale says, do the mapping behind the scenes into the technology domain and keep that separation of concerns, because I think there's a natural language fit between that kind of set of ideas.
I think just to add to that, I think sometimes IT people can forget that in the IT domain, this thinking of services is a relatively new concept, maybe over the last sort of 4 or 5 years. But for business people, a lot of business people have been thinking this way, for their whole careers, just looking at the business in terms of services and how they work together.
Yeah. There's a few interesting questions coming in all along a similar line of what do I do next from people who are in various different stages of going through SOA. So I'll sort of pick out a few of those as well. One of the questions, Dale, is picking up on a phrase that you used in your presentation. That was the infrastructure approach to the problem. He says, when you're starting from nothing, if you're taking the infrastructure approach, what is the first tool that one should implement or investigate?
I think the starting point, the natural starting point is to start to redefine or re-articulate what's there already in a services way. So some people can start with just simple sort of mapping tools and work with diagramming tools, and almost it's an analysis exercise. The problem with that is those are kind of very inactive. So if you're just sort of mapping and diagramming, there's not really much you can do with them after that. So we would encourage people to move quite quickly to genuine modelling tools which support the SOA kind of paradigm. And that way, as you're capturing definitions, you're able to act on those in systems terms later on. So start with that kind of analysis, modelling end. You'll quickly move into probably best to hand over to you at that point.
Well, I was going to say, I think you're absolutely right. I think it's all about that whole approach allows you to, as I said before, I think codify understanding, and that is a value add immediately to both the IT function as well as to the potential of the business. If you can start to model that and start to look at new behaviours and simulate some new to-be states for a business process that you've modelled, even if it's implemented at an IT level, and only an IT level, that's perfectly rational and it's perfectly meaningful in terms of a business outcome. So I would certainly endorse that as a strategy around business modelling.
Okay. The next question I'll pick out is somebody who's a little bit down the line from the first question there. This one's saying, working in higher education with tight resources, both staff and financial constraints, and a multitude of application systems and point-to-point interfaces, we've undertaken an audit of the various components and written an outline approach. What will be our next step, having done that? Either of you, Gary?
So I was going to say, classically, it's kind of like the federation word, which is a kind of has connotations in the IT landscape, but very much around whatever it is that you're using to do your enterprise application integration type world messaging components. It may well be you have enterprise service bus. It may well be you have the need to bring, in your higher education environment, different departments together, different locations, all that environment around integration. So getting those integration aspects properly modelled and then start looking at how you federate capabilities to support services is probably where I would start. It's kind of more of a bottom-up type approach, I guess, is what I would think I'm hearing in terms of the problem statement. But there are useful techniques and design patterns around connectivity and reuse of aspects of the architecture that get you to the first base at the foundational level to actually start driving real value. And that's what I would suggest is a good starting point.
Yeah, I think it sounds as if in that particular case, and it's a good example, the gist of SOA has been taken on board very well. It's really now a case of how do I get things hanging together and automate it in a much more coherent manner. I mean, to cut to the chase, that's the point at which it's worth picking up the phone to a few suppliers and saying, look, can you come in, show us what you can do in terms of middleware, and take it from there. Really, you'll get a lot of education from suppliers in terms of the mechanics of how you might go about doing that.
Yeah. Okay. And the third perspective on the similar question, which I thought was an interesting one as well, says, where does one start given a complex multi-service provider, siloed, multi-technology legacy environment? Yeah, there you go.
Well, again, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead. I'm sure you come across
this. So again, and that is the typical scenario. It's not particularly unique. And so again, it's about, and it's easy to say, but there are approaches that allow us to talk at those existing assets I talked about and the inventory of understanding of those assets, and how you then work around a plan that says, if there's a piece of value, it could be in a transaction engine, it could be in a database warehouse, it could be in other parts of your application infrastructure where you know that this is mission critical, or the business is driving particular heat around that, around operating costs, around the need to instantiate new products or whatever. That's where you need to drive some focus. So you need to find a piece of scope, and it's usually in the process domain where that scope is found, and that's the bit that drives through some of that obvious complexity that's inherent in the IT landscape. But not to try and deal with that at first shot. Is just try and find a piece of scope that you can then work and model and use to actually try out the tools, kick the tires around it, get the business and IT working together, and then you start to drive out agendas that can actually add incremental business outcome value.
Yeah, don't try and boil the ocean is the big thing. I mean, define some business outcome that you're looking to drive. It's usually a stress process or something which needs to change for some other reason. And then just enough and good enough are two phrases that we often use. Don't try and model everything before you get to addressing that problem. Model outwards and in the context of that problem you're trying to solve until you've got enough to actually start acting upon the modelling that you've done. So don't think you have to do everything. Also, don't think that everything that you're going to have in place and you're going to be connecting together has to be pure SOA behind the scenes. Wrapper legacy systems, put services interfaces between them and your SOA development. Don't worry about SOA police coming around and saying, well, that's not proper SOA. It doesn't work like that. You just want to solve the problem.
Yeah, of course.